His question is, what is the punishment in the hereafter for someone who has committed fornication with his stepdaughter? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all and guide us to what's best. I begin by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. Don't go near adultery. Do not approach it, because it is an evil act. It is an illicit act, and it leads astray. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade all the means which may lead to zina, and He commanded the person to lower his gaze from looking at what Allah has prohibited, a woman who's not lawful to him. Even the maharim, whenever the person feels that he is tempted to look at the umrah of any of the maharim, then it becomes prohibited for him to take any of these means. He should avoid that as well. In a situation we have a person who stays with his stepdaughter, you know that it is not lawful for him to marry to his stepdaughter forever, whether he's still married to her mother or not. So if marriage is not permissible in this case, what about falling into an act of fahisha? That happens due to the fact that sometimes the girl does not dress properly in the presence of the maharim, in the presence of her stepfather, due to the khalwa, and also lack of iman and lack of knowledge. Then all these components lead together to indulging into the act of zina. Zina is one of the most heinous sins, and it has a severe punishment in the dunya and in al-akhirah. The brother inquired only about the punishment in the hereafter, which I will begin with, fil akhirah. We all know that al-akhirah, or the hereafter, begins at the time of death. There is some sort of punishment or reward in the grave, which is known as hayatul barzakh, a transient life between the life of this world and the life of the hereafter, after resurrection. So the believers and the good doers also will be rewarded in the grave, while the sinners, the wicked and the disbelievers, will be punished in the grave. In Surah Ghafir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the Pharaoh and his hosts, النار يعرضون عليها غدوا وعشيا ويوم تقوم الساعة أدخلوا آل فرعون أشد العذاب. This ayah indicates that the Pharaoh and his hosts are being punished as long as they are dead. Somebody would say, but they are not, they haven't been buried. True, it doesn't have to be in a grave. If the person was burned into ashes and his ashes were thrown in the dust, and the dust was thrown on a windy day, each atom will be dealt with even separately. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to do all things. If a person who has been swallowed by a shark or eaten by a wild animal, still he will be dealt with in his grave, whether with a reward or a punishment. That's known as hayatul barzakh. إذا مات الميت قامت قيامته. He will begin to experience the consequences of his deeds, whether good or bad, beginning from the grave. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith which is narrated by Samura ibn Jundub, and it is a sound hadith, when two angels came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and took him in a night journey. This is the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw some amazing scenes. Amongst that, he saw men and women who were naked being thrown in a tanur, like an oven, huge oven, like a huge pot, and beneath it fire is being kindled. And he saw in the tanur, in this oven, which is very spacious from bottom and with a narrow top, men and women who were naked, and women had been hung from their breasts. When he inquired about that, he was told, these are az-zunah, the adulterers and the adulteress. In the grave they have been punished until the day of resurrection. Fire will be kindled beneath the tanur, and they will be punished حتى يوم القيامة. May Allah protect us. Then in al-akhirah, in the sound hadith, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, ثلاثة لا ينظر الله إليهم يوم القيامة ولا يكلمهم ولا يزكيهم. There are three categories or three kinds of people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not even look at them, would turn away from them, which is a very serious sign of being upset and angry with them. They will be deprived from His mercy. and Allah would not even talk to them and would not purify them. The three people, one of them, Shaykhun Zanin, a person who has committed adultery while he was grown up, or an old man. It even becomes worse when a person commits adultery with a woman who is not lawful to him, and she's married to his neighbor, for instance. That applies also to his stepdaughter. So what we need to do is, number one, the person needs to repent sincerely and continue to be worried about this kind of sin, and avoid all sorts of temptation which may lead him to repeat this doing again and again and again. I remember once, and I do not mind sharing with you my personal experiences, when I was told, instead of paying the whole rent by yourself, you can share a house with an American family. And I looked in the paper and I located a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and I phoned them so that I can see whether it's possible or not, when I was in the beginning of my life and studying, and I didn't have enough means. So when I visited the house and I saw that there's only a young girl, a teenager, close to my age, and her grandmother were only living by themselves in this house, and I would share a room next to her room and so on in the house, then right away Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supported me to make the decision. No means no, even though it would have been much safer and better as far as learning language, hanging around with their American family. But most likely a situation like that, the person will put himself in fire, would put himself in a situation where he most likely will end up indulging into the fahisha. That's why it is very important to block all the means which lead to haram. Barakallahu fikum. Tawbah is now mandatory. Person must repent unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If there is no Islamic ruling, and though there is no worldly punishment, then the person may, after repenting unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, continue to beg him for forgiveness, so that on the day of judgment, according to the hadith of Ubadah ibn Samit, and the hadith is collected by Imam Bukhari, وَمَنْ أَصَابَ مِنْهَا شَيْئًا, whoever committed any of the above sins, which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned amongst them as zina, adultery, فَسَتَرَهُ اللَّهُ, and Allah concealed them and concealed the sin for him, فَأَمْرُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ, then his matter is up to Allah on the day of judgment. إِنْ شَاءَ عَفَى عَنْهُ إِنْ شَاءَ عَذَّبَهُ. If he wills, he would pardon him and forgive him, and if he wills, he will punish him. The person have to beg Allah for his mercy and continue to seek his forgiveness, and avoid indulging into the sin one more time. May Allah guide us what's best.